Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. In today's video, I want to explain the two ways that men have failed women. And if we look not just in our modern world, but even through the centuries, really, men have failed women. Now, don't get me wrong, I also understand that with the feminist movement, you can almost have some resentment to modern day women, especially because they've almost come to a point where they're abusing men or taking advantage of the system and men are suffering. But I'm forgetting about that for the moment. I'm just looking at how, because men, we ultimately are of more power and authority, we hold the responsibility and we should take that responsibility, and everything stems from us. And just as the same way, if you have a kid who's misbehaved, you're going to look to the authority, who's the parent, and say, well, the parent's messed up. And in the same way that men are naturally have a slightly worldly higher authority than women, if women are acting crazy, then ultimately it all stems from us as a men failing women. And the two ways that men have failed women is by being wimps or being bullies. And as you can see from the thumbnail, classic example is in the liberal West, people criticize women for being like over sexual, and everything is about sex and women using their sexual or overly sexual desires from men. And then you have the opposite end, you have the bullies, where they places like radical Islamic countries where they stick the women in burqas and basically bully them into submission, locking them in a house, not giving them education. And even in non-hardcore Muslim countries or in Muslim beliefs, even in within Islam, they'll still abuse the women, and also in Christianity they still do it. And obviously, this is not to say everyone, but it still happens a lot, and it is part of the religion. And I was watching a video the other day of a Catholic sort of young woman who just got married, but she was talking about her bad dating experience with Catholic men, and it's kind of the misunderstood spiritual wisdom that's gone into religion of men are above women so they can treat them in a certain way. And it's almost the sort of stuff that Andrew Tate and many others talk about, but they don't understand the true meaning of man has authority over women, but it's not so that they can bully them. It's because they're supposed to be the light of the world for the woman. And a classic example is in the Bible, the main man, Jesus Christ, and you had the loser religious people who wanted to stone the woman to death, whereas Jesus Christ was of the light. So you had the wimps, who was the guy who was probably, well, the wimp was the guy who was sleeping with the adulterous woman. So he was a wimp and he gave in to his sexual temptations. Then you had the bullies, were the men who wanted to stone her. But then you had the man of the light, how all men should be, like Jesus. He came along, he saved her, so he protected her from the bullies. But he also wasn't a wimp, and he said, "Now go and sin no more. Stop being a hoe." Maybe was what he not what he said, but I'm paraphrasing. But the point is, he is perfect love, and he wasn't a wimp, he wasn't a bully, but he was the light. And if you look at all the women around him, they looked up to him and he had authority over them, but because he was the light, not because he was a bully. And I think it's a good analogy, even for men, of how we should look to God and how God looks to us. God is not like the Abrahamic God who bullies us and warns us and says, if you don't do this, I'm going to send you to eternal hell. That's not how God is supposed to be, or not how God is supposed to be, but that's not how God is. God is perfect and a loving God. He just gives us gentle persuasion to turn to him. He's not an insecure bully, and if we don't submit to him, then we're going to be eternal torment. Just in the same way that if a man goes to his wife, if you don't submit to me, I'm going to give you lashings, or I'm going to beat you, or I'm going to punish you, he's a loser. And the same way that the Abrahamic God is a loser. But the true father, as shown by Jesus Christ, he doesn't bully us. He is the light. And now I've returned to the Father, I naturally obey and follow my Father out of love, not out of fear. So if I was to get married, or Jesus was to get married, or any man of Christ who's of the light was to get married, the woman would naturally obey, but it wouldn't be an obey out of fear. They would just see the light in us and follow it, just as Mary Magdalene and all the people who follow Jesus around, even in non-sexual and marriage relationships, they can still follow men who are the light of the world. And you see it even with a lot of political commentators who get married and they claim to be Christian, and then their wives come out a few years later and say, "Oh, yeah, they were bullying me." just as what happened with Stephen Crowder when you saw the video of him discussing with his wife. Now, I understand that all couples can have a little bit of arguments and slight tetchiness. That's natural. But he was completely disrespectful and he was behaving a bit like a man child. And yet he's one of these, oh, I'm a Christian, oh, I know how to handle. But he was treating his wife, who, to be fair, his wife seems a little bit mental as well. But regardless, a real man of the light would never abuse his wife in such a way. And so that's me clarifying the bully. But let me just also get back to the wimp as well. In the West, men have become wimps. So they're either simps who just worship women, or they give in to their sexual desires, or they're sex obsessed. And this is the reason why so many women are bimbos and do all this OnlyFans, because the weak men pay them. If men were strong and they pulled the best out of the women rather than the worst, then there would be no OnlyFans. The only reason OnlyFans exists is not because the women do it, it's because the men pay. If men were noble and they said, why do I want to mess around or watch women being bimbos and whatever they do on OnlyFans, then the women wouldn't do it. And real men protect the women from that, just as most of these women who do it have no fathers or weak fathers. And also, we live in a weak society with weak men. But if men were noble and good fathers and all that stuff, then women wouldn't get into that sort of stuff. But because men are wimps, they've got into it. And most modern women know if they want anything, they can just use their sexuality to get it. Because even in politics, let's look at Kamala Harris, use her sexuality to get into being president. And if I go on YouTube, if I say, well, I want to watch some golf, if I want to watch some ASMR, if I want to get some health advice or watch some massage advice, if I've got an injury, all the top videos will always be women using their sexuality to get views. They won't just do a video in normal clothes. They'll be half naked, and you can tell that they're using their sexuality to gain success. So men need to stop being either too simpy or too sex obsessed and return to the spirit. And once you return to the spirit and you work on yourself, you'll come to your true spiritual senses, and women and the world won't be able to control you. And women do not have respect for weak men. But once you find your power and women can't use and abuse you, they will respect you, and then they'll naturally fall in line. If all men behaved in a noble way, we'd bring the best out of the women rather than the worst out of the women. And a good analogy that Roy Masters always says is the Adam and Eve syndrome, in that Adam was weak and he fell for Eve's temptations and took the apple, which caused them to fall. But Jesus Christ, because he was perfect and he was the main man, he showed the way. He didn't fall to temptation. He didn't allow evil to overcome him. And he resurrected us back to the spirit and restored the fall. And that's why women look to him with reverence and respect. Whereas Adam would be the guy on OnlyFans watching porn all day. Okay, so to finish off the video, that's my encouragement, just to encourage men to spiritually awaken, gain your power. Your power is in the spirit, and stop simping after women and stop bullying women as well. And also, my heart goes out to the women because, especially the women at the hands of the bullies. When you look at especially extremist Islamic ones, I know a lot of, or not know a lot online, I see a lot of ex-Muslim women who suffered under these regimes, who weren't allowed education, and they're basically destroying women's souls for their own stupid religions. And it's the same a lot with Christianity. It's just less hardcore in Christianity. And I can tell you, knowing the Father and the love of the Father, that's not the way to treat women. People deserve freedom, but freedom to live a righteous life, not a sinful life. But when you have no freedom and you kind of make people submit and bully them, that's not how God operates. If God wanted to do that, he wouldn't have gave us free will. But God loves us so much, he gave us free will and freedom to live as independent beings. But his real hope for us is that we're free, but we're free to serve one another in love, as it says in the Bible, and to serve him, not be free to serve our sinful fleshly desires, like going on OnlyFans and watching porn all day or chasing women for sex. No, he wants us to live noble lives, maybe get a wife and kids and build a beautiful community and country and live for his glory, not for our own selfish glories. Okay, so that's pretty much my point of today's video. The usual stuff. If you like the video, like it, comment below if you have any comments, and subscribe for more if you are new. God bless everyone. Goodbye.